So, I talked to a couple of you already this morning, and you were telling me that you were brand new to holstering or relatively uncomfortable. Who can show me that? Awesome. We can talk. It's okay to be honest, right? So, what I'd like to do real quick is just talk through some holstering things. I gave some people some tips already when we were at the table, but I really want to clarify some of that. And even if you are more seasoned, you have a little bit more experience with it, it's good to know because we have some variables that are existing today. Hoodies, multiple layer cover, things like that. So I think it makes sense to kind of just go through that really quick. One of the things that causes me the most concern in relation to holster work is not really the presentation of the gun, it's the reholster. Because we think we've done all of the work, and that's when we kind of check out, right? So we're like, oh, put the gun away. That's when we point guns at ourselves. It happens significantly more than we think because we don't really have a good idea of what our body's doing at that point because we're examining our target, we're talking to our friends, we just had a great drill or we just had a bad drill and we're beating ourselves up about it, and we point the gun right at ourselves, right? So that's one thing I want to be really cognizant of, and also with cover work. If we're, especially with multiple layers of cover, I want you to take your time and think about, there is no race, there is no trophy to put your gun away. It just doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in defensive work. It doesn't exist in like fun. It just doesn't exist. We've already done the work. Now it's time to take a moment to evaluate what we're doing, getting it back in there so we can go again, right? So do not be concerned about taking time to do that. I also 100% give you permission for the rest of this class. If there's a concern or you're not sure what to do in your reholstering process, stop. Ask for help. That's what we're here for. It's our sole job, is to kind of spend time with you and help you get better at that or spot inefficiencies and help eliminate those. Does that make sense for everybody? Yes. And you guys agree to help me with that? So we absolutely agree you'll ask me for help so I can kind of, awesome, sweet. So John's gonna demonstrate a couple things. First, through the safety part of it, what I was just talking about, how we're angling our muzzles, things like that when we're putting it away, how we're angling our muzzles when we're bringing it out, and give you a visual kind of idea of what that looks like. He's got a blue gun on, and he's actually wearing a hoodie that'll actually help with some of that. But the biggest thing that I can ask you is don't be afraid to ask for help. There's no judgment here.
See, we're women. We ask for help.
I hope so. Well, I think what happens a lot, though, is people tend to believe they're doing something they may not be doing. So if we ever get like that concern where I'm not 100% sure if this is right, oh, please tell me. Please, please. It makes me so happy when I get to help. And then we are going to do some holster work today. So that's the biggest thing. Like, there's no race. There's understanding and refining technique. And then there's making sure we get it away safely so we can do it again. If we get that done, that's something that you can carry through your entire shooting journey. And you can refine and refine and refine. And then you get to the point where it's so ingrained with what you're doing, there's no more work involved. Like, you've built that process, and that process begins to work for you. But you have to start really applying a lot of thought in the beginning to make that work right. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. So, what I'd first like to show them, John, and you're strong side, yes? Or, okay.
I have strong side, and I also have a holster up front, too.
Okay, what I would like to show them is really like the things that tend to happen when we're like fishing for our holster, like where that muzzle goes.
Yeah.
And I want you guys to kind of think about that. If I've ever like used a holster or the first time you applied it, I want you to pay attention to where that muzzle points and think, have I ever done that? Critically think that. And then if that's the case, now we have it in our head, like, ooh, that's something we need to think about. Does that make sense? Sweet.
So ladies, first of all, this is a blue piece of plastic, right? So this is a VP9 looking piece of plastic, but it's a piece of plastic. And we have these because it lets us do things we would never consider doing with a real gun, okay? So I can point out parts. I can say, see, this is the muzzle. And I'd never do that with a real gun because I like this tip of this finger and I don't want to shoot it off, right? But this is a blue gun, so we can do stuff like this, okay? That's the value of them, that's why we have it. So I have a strong side holster here. Just FYI, I never carry strong side personally, but some people do. And so for those of you who are chapter leaders, instructors, those things having the ability to demonstrate, that's really good, okay? On strong side here, And some of you are around the front. I have that on for to show that in a minute too. But the thing that we see is we do all the pew that we've got. Pew, 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 pew. And then the first thing I see is this. Constantly. Now it may not be quite that big a deal. But how much angle do I need to streak one through my hip? Not much. Not a whole lot. So let's see. I believe Neil and I know 2 people who have streaked bullets through the outside of their leg. 2 of them. The first one took a full 18 months to be able to walk without a limp. The second one, as far as I know, is still recovering 2.5 years later.
Still walks with a limp.
Still walks with a limp. May not ever. That second one went in the top of her thigh, out the quadricep just above the knee, back in the calf muscle below the knee, and out the calf muscle at the bottom. 4 entry and exit wounds from 1 bullet. So you're like, well, so some folks will go, well, outside the waistband's safer because it's not as big a deal to put a bullet through. I strongly disagree. So this is probably number 1. We go, we got to fish our way back to this, and we point that at our iliac crest, we point it at our thigh, those kinds of things. The second, what's that?
I said the femoral artery.
Yeah, it's not far away. I mean, it's right over here, right? And your femur is your number 1 blood producing organ, right? So your femur produces about 75% of your blood. So you put a bullet in it, and it's bad. It's one of the most painful things you can possibly do. The other thing I see people do a lot. So here I am in a shooting position, pew, 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 doing pew, pew stuff, right? And now I go, cool, I'm going to put this gun back here. What's happened? I pointed this muzzle at my toes. Does anybody here not like their big toe? Very hard to walk without a big toe. People don't recognize that. You shoot off your big toe, you will have a real struggle to walk for the rest of your life. Then their kneecap. Anybody here ever blown their meniscus? Nobody's ever blown their meniscus? Oh my gosh. You broke your patella? How was that? It sucked. I bet it did suck. Now imagine having done it with a bullet.
No, thank you.
Yeah, now I've got an open wound as well as the busted patella to deal with. And then again, all the way through the top of my thigh. Okay? So these are our 2 things that we see all the time that create these big problems. The third one that we see, thank you for that all the time, is I see people come this way and they go like this. And they clear that with their hand, okay? Or they're having a hard time getting it. I got to open constantly. These support hand fingers, I'm left-handed, so I'm not left-handed, but I shoot left-handed. I'm weird, just deal with me. Those support hand fingers. Anybody else left-handed here?
I am.
You are, all right. God only makes so many of us correct-handed. Okay? Got some lefties up in the house. Awesome. For those of you incorrect-handed people, that's okay too. We're all right with you.